I do. Well, hello everybody. How y'all doing? It is Monday, and thanks for tuning in. It says we're live, so we're live. Favor to everyone, and BOSTO is how we do it here. Yeah, be of service to others. I think it's the answer, but hey, I'm just a voice of what, 7.5 billion? There we go. And I can hear myself coming and going. So time travel is been proven. Great. So how y'all? Hello, David Barry. How you doing, my friend? And let's see, Susie Q. Hello, how are you? And Nina, how are you doing? Thomas and Darth. Kaylee, so good to see you. And Grandpa Brian and Isby and Spirit Woman, Colorado. Dragon Soul Fox. Hey, Basil, what's up? David Castle, how you doing? Kent Cook, good to see y'all. So, hello, Red Roof Ranch. Yeah, really good to see you. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Bernadette and Emperor Rex. So, what's happening, folks? It's a strange day out there. Beautiful weather here. We actually got cool weather. I could actually say chilly, and feels great. We saw the geese flying. So I don't know. Farmer's Almanac says we're going to get hit hard up here in North America, in the United States. Wouldn't surprise me with everything else going on. Just wouldn't surprise me. So favor unto us all. Trust you're doing good. Been thinking a lot. We are in an interesting time, are we not? It's really, I would almost say it is, what's a good word for it? Wonderment? No, I don't know. I'll think of a good one. Maybe you have one. Hey, Joe Sapiens, what's up? Someone said here in Colorado they captured two suns coming. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, are we in a simulation? Are we in something that we perceive to be Earth, the heavens? You know, we've got satellites up there, so we know that the Earth is round. I mean, it's the whole idea of how satellites communicate. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about uniformity, conformity, you know, equality for everyone. How far are they willing to take that idea of conformity? Because today, I don't know. You know, it's like if you don't conform to whatever the thing of the trend is, then you get branded, labeled, ostracized. And one of the Soul Tribes members sent me a short little book. I had forgotten all about it. And we're going to read it. It's short because conformity, you hear that. If you just conform to what the state says or what the school says or what your parents say, then, you know, you're part of the trend. You're the herd. And who doesn't like being part of the herd? You know, the thing about herds, they can turn into stampedes. And I've never witnessed a stampede, don't want to. But those who have, uh, it's not a pleasant experience. Just not. And so, but unity, think about it. If everyone's unified, then what? Peace? Is that what we're told? Is that really what it is? Um, A uniform has been imposed by governments, tyrants, dictators, dystopian corporations. We hear it in terms of dress code. We hear it, um, hey Hadley, how you doing? You wear a uniform, why? Well, because you become uniformed. There is a continuity that is maintained. The consistency is the blending. Uniforms can also distinguish. They can also be a form of control by identification. But uniformity, if you take it for what they're saying, well, will bring what? Peace? Again, I asked that question. Peace, really? So let's get right into our story. You're going to love this. This is Harrison Bergeron. Bergeron, yeah, it's amazing. I know that name well. Give me 1 second here. There we go. All right, and this is by Kurt Vonnegut. Let's just read this. Many of you may have, but it's well worth us taking a journey back again, or maybe for the first time. And cheers to everybody. It's the tea day. It's hot tea, by the way. Oh, yeah. Mm. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law, they were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General. By the way, tune in on Thursday night on Artists First. Yeah, I'm going to be talking more about this week. It's going to be a special show. I continue. Some things about living still weren't quite right, though. April, for instance, still drove people crazy by not being springtime. And it was in that clammy month that the HG men took George and Hazel Bergeron's 14-year-old son, Harrison, away. Yeah, it was tragic, all right. But George and Hazel couldn't think about it very hard. Hazel had a perfectly average intelligence, which meant she couldn't think about anything except in short bursts. Commentary by R. Wayne Steiger. We're seeing it now. Just download our app. Our app will help choose your clothes. Our app will help remind you to brush your teeth. Our app, yeah. But I digress. And George, while his intelligence was way above normal, had a little mental handicap radio in his ear. He was required by law to wear it at all times. It was tuned to a government transmitter. Every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would send out some sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains. 6G anyone? 7 or 10? George and Hazel were watching television. There were tears on Hazel's cheeks, but she'd forgotten for the moment what they were about. On the television screen were ballerinas, and a buzzer sounded in George's head. His thoughts fled in panic, like bandits from a burglar alarm. That was a real pretty dance. That dance they just did, said Hazel. Huh? Said George. The dance. It was nice, said Hazel. Yeah, George said. He tried to think a little about ballerinas. They weren't really very good. No better than anybody else would have been anyway. They were burdened with sash weights and bags of birdshot, and their faces were masked, so that no one, seeing a free and graceful gesture or a pretty face, would feel like something the cat drug in. George was toying with the vague notion that maybe dancers shouldn't be handicapped. But he didn't get very far with it before another noise in his ear radio scattered his thoughts. George winced. So did 2 out of 8 ballerinas. Hazel saw him wince. Having no mental handicap herself, she had to ask George what the latest sound had been. Sounded like somebody hitting a damn milk bottle with a ball-peen hammer, George said. I think it would be real interesting hearing all the different sounds, said Hazel, a little envious. All the things they think up. What? Said George. Only if I was handicaptor general. You know what I would do, said Hazel. Hazel, as a matter of fact, bore a strong resemblance to the handicapper general, a woman named Diana Moon Glampers. If I was Diana Moon Glampers, Hazel said, I'd have chimes on Sunday. Just chimes. Kind of in honor of religion. I could think if it was just chimes, said George. Well, maybe make 'em loud enough, said Hazel. I think I'd make a good handicapper general. Good as anybody else, said George. Who knows? Better'n I do what normal is, said Hazel. Right, George said. He began to think glimmeringly about his abnormal son who was now in jail, about Harrison, about a 21-gun salute in his head. Stop that. Boy, said Hazel, that was a doozy, wasn't it? It was such a doozy that George was white and trembling, and tears stood on the rim of his red eyes. 2 of the 8 ballerinas had collapsed to the studio floor, were holding their temples. All of a sudden, you look so tired, said Hazel. Why don't you stretch out on the sofa so's you can rest your handicap bag on the pillow, Honey Bunch? She was referring to the 47 pounds of birdshot in a canvas bag, which was padlocked around George's neck. Go on and rest the bag for a little while, she said. I don't care if you're not equal to me for a while. George weighed the bag with his hands. I don't mind it, he said. I don't notice it anymore. It's just a part of me. You've been so tired lately. Kind of wore out, said Hazel. If there was just some way we could make a little hole in the bottom of the bag and just take out a few of them lead balls, just a few. 2 years in prison and $2,000 fine for every ball I took out, said George. I don't call that a bargain. If you could just take a few out when you came home from work, Hazel said. I mean, you don't compete with anybody around here. You just sit around. If I try to get away with it, said George, then other people get away with it, and pretty soon we'd be right back to the Dark Ages again, with everybody competing against everybody else. Who wouldn't like that? Would you? I'd hate it, said Hazel. There you are, said George. The minute people start cheating on laws, what do you think happens to society? If Hazel hadn't been able to come up with an answer to the question, George couldn't have supplied one. A siren was going off in his head. I reckon it'd fall apart, said Hazel. What would? Said George blankly. Society, said Hazel uncertainly. Wasn't that what you just said? Who knows, George said. The television program was suddenly interrupted for a news bulletin. It wasn't clear at first as to what the bulletin was about. Since the announcer, like all announcers, had a serious speech impediment, for about half a minute, in a state of high excitement, the announcer tried to say, "Ladies and gentlemen." He finally gave up, handed the bulletin to the ballerina to read. "That's all right," Hazel said to the announcer. "He tried. That's a big thing. He tried to do the best he could with what God gave him. He should get a nice raise for trying so hard." "Ladies and gentlemen," said the ballerina, reading the bulletin. She must have been extraordinarily beautiful because the mask she wore was hideous, and it was easy to see that she was the strongest and most graceful of all the dancers, for her handicap bags were as big as those worn by 200-pound men. and she had been and she had to apologize at once for her voice, which was a very unfamiliar voice for a woman to use. Her voice was a warm, luminous, timeless melody. "Excuse me," she said, and she began again, making her voice absolutely uncompetitive. "Harrison Bergeron, age 14, she said in a crackle squawk, has just escaped from jail, where he was held on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. He is a genius and an athlete, is under handicapped, and should be regarded as extremely dangerous." A police photograph of Harrison Bergeron was flashed on the screen. Upside down, then sideways, upside down again, then right side up, the picture showed the full length of Harrison against a background calibrated in feet and inches. He was exactly 7 feet tall. The rest of Harrison's appearance was Halloween and hardware. Nobody had ever worn heavier handicaps. He had outgrown hindrances faster than the HG men could think them up. Instead of a little ear radio for a mental handicap, he wore a tremendous pair of earphones and spectacles with thick, wavy lenses. The spectacles were intended to make him not only half blind, but to give him raging headaches besides. Scrap metal was hung all over him. Ordinarily, there was a certain symmetry, a military neatness to the handicaps issued to strong people. But Harrison looked like a walking junkyard. In the race of life, Harrison carried 300 pounds. And to offset his good looks, the HG men required that he wear at all times a red rubber ball for a nose, keep his eyebrows shaved off, and cover his even white teeth with black caps at snaggletooth random. Mm, mm, mm. "If you see this boy," said the ballerina, "do not, and I repeat, do not try to reason with him." There was a shriek of a door being torn from its hinges. Screams and barking cries of consternation came from the television set. A photograph of Harrison Bergeron on the screen jumped again and again, as though dancing to the tune of an earthquake. George Bergeron correctly identified the earthquake, and, well, he might have. For many was the time his own home had danced to the same crashing tune. "My God," said George, "that must be Harrison." The realization was blasted from his mind instantly by the sound of an automobile collision in his head. When George could open his eyes again, the photograph of Harrison was gone. A living, breathing Harrison filled the screen. Clanking, clownish, and huge, Harrison stood in the center of the studio. The knob of the uprooted studio doors was still in his hand. Ballerinas, technicians, musicians, and announcers cowered on their knees before him, expecting to die. "I am the Emperor," cried Harrison. "Do you hear? I am the Emperor. Everybody must do what I say at once." He stamped his foot and the studio shook. "Even as I stand here," he bellowed, "crippled, hobbled, sickened, I am a greater ruler than any man who ever lived. Now watch me become what I can become." Harrison tore the straps of his handicap harnesses like wet tissue paper, tore straps guaranteed to support 5,000 pounds. Harrison's scrap iron handicaps crashed to the floor. Harrison thrust his thumbs under the bar of the padlock that secured his head harness. The bar snapped like celery. Harrison smashed his headphones and spectacles against the wall. He flung away his rubber ball nose, revealed a man that would have awed Thor, the god of thunder. "I shall now select my empress," he said, looking down on the cowering people. "Let the first woman who dare rise to her feet claim her mate and her throne." A moment paused, and then a ballerina arose, swaying like a willow. Harrison plucked the mental handicap from her ear, snapped off her physical handicaps with marvelous delicacy. Last of all, he removed her mask. She was blindingly beautiful. "Now," said Harrison, taking her hand, "shall we show the people the meaning of the word dance?" "Music," he commanded. The musicians scrambled back to their chairs, and Harrison stripped them of their handicaps too. "Play your best," he told them, "and I'll make you barons and dukes and earls." The music began. It was normal at first, cheap, silly, false, but Harrison snatched two musicians from their chairs, waved them like batons as he sang the music he wanted it played. He slammed them back into their chairs. The music began again. It was much improved. Harrison and his empress merely listened to the music for a while, listened gravely, as though synchronizing their heartbeats with it. They shifted their weights to their toes. Harrison placed his big hands on the girl's tiny waist, letting her sense the weightlessness that would soon be hers. And then, in an explosion of joy and grace, into the air they sprang. Not only were the laws of the land abandoned, but the laws of gravity and the laws of motion as well. They reeled, whirled, swiveled, flounced, capered, gamboled, and spun. They leaped like deer on the moon. The studio ceiling was 30 feet high, but each leap brought the dancers near to it. It became their obvious intention to kiss the ceiling. They kissed it. And then, neutralizing gravity with love and pure will, they remained suspended in the air inches below the ceiling. And they kissed each other for a long, long time. It was that Diana Moon Glampers, the handicapper general, came into the studio with a double-barreled 10-gauge shotgun. She fired twice, and the emperor and the empress were dead before they hit the floor. Diane Moon Glampers loaded the gun again. She aimed it at the musicians and told them that they had 10 seconds to get their handicaps back on. It was then that the Bergeron's television tube burned out. Hazel turned to comment about the blackout to George, but George had gone out into the kitchen for a can of beer. George came back in with the beer, paused while a handicap signal shook him up, and then he sat down again. "You been crying?" he said to Hazel. "Yep," she said. "About what?" "I forgot." She said, "Something real sad on television." "What was it?" he said. "It's all kind of mixed up in my mind," she said. "Forget sad things," George said. "I always do," said Hazel. "That's my girl," said George. He winced. There was the sound of a riveting gun in his head. "Gee, I could tell that one was a doozy," said Hazel. "You can say that again," said George. "Gee," said Hazel, "I could tell that one was a doozy." Yeah. Interesting little short story, isn't it? So many things come to mind. I mean, think about it. Are we being controlled right now? With the advent of what Elon Musk, and I don't think Elon's alone. I really don't. I think his idea and concept of Neuralink is his vision. I think there's others. But how many of us are Georges? How many are Hazels? It was interesting in the dialogue of what George said. Once one law is ignored, broken, then the whole thing unzips all the way down. Kind of what we're doing right now. How many are already hooked up to the handicap devices? I have contended for some 4+ years on this channel that the scheme was to give every person, regardless of economic, social demographics, everyone was to get a phone. If you remember, it almost seems like yesterday, doesn't it? That 8 years ago, that was what the government in the United States did. Everybody got a phone. Everybody has one. I contend, and I think there's others as well, that these devices are just that. They're controlling, they're controllers. They're part of the control matrix. Everything is going to an app. Everything. It's not what we envisioned in 1998. I can tell you that. We did not envision, had no way of comprehending the rapid adaption of what we call today the smartphone. Everything is integrated in it, and it's literally, it's a living computer. It knows you. If you use Siri, if you use Alexa, no matter which you're using, you are a replicant now. There is a digital surrogate of you. You don't own it, but it's you. It's as you as you'll ever be. And when you die, they'll own you. You're going to still live on, but you're going to live on in a whole different, you see, the goal is, as Elon Musk showed on Friday, and I'm still pondering, I mean, we're such in the infancy of this, but as a visionary, and I'm on the record on this, saw this coming. And it's here. The thing that I don't really think anyone has thought through, as I spoke out on a Steiger's perspective, what does this really mean? We just read the story of the Bergerons, George and Hazel. And you could say that they were law-abiding, good citizens. They did what the state said to do. And their son, you could say, well, was the answer to all the ills of mankind. But mankind doesn't want to be cured from our ills. Because if one is cured, we'll invent others. And with all the changes that are taking place, all of them, I wonder what happens if the kill switch is ever thrown. What happens? I mean, do we suddenly become lost? I can't imagine if the internet had gone down during the first lockdown. Couldn't imagine it. It would have been pandemonium, folks. When I was growing up, you know, we didn't have a television. Now, the first television I do remember is in 1958, 59. First color television, 1960. But, you had to get up and actually turn the channels. There were only 3. But, yeah. And we didn't know what to do with television, the programming. I mean, it was the idea. It was there to television. And as I have mentioned before, there wasn't the news. There was no local news. I mean, what do you mean putting someone on a camera and telling them the news? They can read the newspapers. Why do we need to have time in our programming to tell them the news? Well, we suddenly figured out, well, wait a minute. We can tell the vision. That means we can tell the news. And what does news really mean? Julianne Payne, there's a good one for you. Go to the root word of news, N-E-W-S. News, what does that mean? Well, now we do know what it means. It's the ultimate mind control. And even now, as the new generation, and I'm gonna, after what's seen on Friday, how many of you watched the demonstration of Elon Musk? So they have it in the snout of a pig. I tell you, I contend, I know he says they're looking for volunteers. I think they already got their volunteers. But you cannot help but ask yourself, as I talked about on the Steiger perspective, are we tapping into our souls? The brain as an organ, it's what we associate consciousness with. And as you could see, we can't have a society where one race would be more intellectually advanced over the other races. You can't have equality with that. So what you have to do is to bring down the ascended ones to the level of those dense ones. And then, because the ascended ones have an energy that the controllers have a very difficult time controlling, we're constantly morphing. That's the interesting thing. And That's why 6G is already out there. I chuckled when I saw all the uproar and all the things on YouTube about 5G, and I thought to myself, I wish these people would really get up to speed on things. It's not 5G. You don't even know. It's 6G. It's out there, and it's out there. Apple pays $36 million a month for access to it. Facebook pays, I think, another 9 or to 10 plus million dollars. I mean, it's there. A lot of what people are seeing as grouped UFOs, yeah, they're satellites. And it's changing everything. The prison is just about, the electronic grid is about to be turned on. And I still question then, what are we really working towards? Are we seeing Homo cyberneticus truly emerge? 7G is already out there. I think it's, I think again, and I'll tell you why. I come out of the film and video industry. In the early 80s, Americans were completely blown away with the opportunity that they could actually take a movie home with them on magnetic tape and actually have a device that they could put this cartridge in, and they could watch a movie with no commercials. They didn't have to go anywhere. Now, there were competing different technologies. The thing that I'm trying to get to, when Americans were being introduced to Betamax and to VHS, what they had no idea about was that the television set that they were watching was antiquated technology that was 30 years old. Now, we accepted it as marvel when we went from NTSC to where we could actually go to color. You know, original television was only black and white. Why? Because the military owned HD. Yes, the HD has been around since the late 40s. High definition. And the thing about it was, the United States used the Japanese people as guinea pigs, psychologically. Why? Because the Japanese, their complete telecommunication system was obliterated from World War II. When the military came in, the military put in military communications, which was HD. And the rest, as you can see. So to answer your question, I think it's already here. I think that's why they're launching these thousands and thousands of satellites. The strength of the signal with these low orbiting satellites is much better than when you have a bird that's, up 100 plus miles up. These swarms are what they're called now. Eventually will cover the skies. So now we have Neuralink and whatever the government's working on. So now we see what? Well, we see uniformity. Eventually, we're going to see conformity. And the question is, what's its impact? As I said before, when I watched them actually putting those electrodes in him, and I don't know, you have to go out there. I think CNET has it on, but you can actually see the demonstration that Musk was showing. And as they were inserting the electrodes into living tissue, Elon was saying that the robot AI Now, he's saying today that Neuralink will protect us from AI, but only AI can actually put the Neuralink in. Humans are not that talented. We got brilliant doctors, but not on that level. And when you can put an electrode into brain tissue and the brain tissue doesn't bleed, I mean, that's how deep they're going into this flesh. But once that electrode is in, you see the skin, the brain. Yeah, that gray matter stuff. And these are thinner than a hair, 1/3, I think, of a hair in diameter. And you have to charge this right now. That's the interesting thing. You have to charge, and they literally have to chip out your brain, your skull, about like that. And they chip the bone out down to the last 2 millimeters. And then they slide what I call the brain computer interface chip. And then that rides flush with your skull with a small port that goes up, and then that jacks you into the neural net. I think that is type 2, type 3 civilization not the cult? That's a very good question. I think it is. There are many who believe that we are witnessing the third fall of man. And by all the evidence, I think they're right. That's the big scare of tech right now. And the reality is this: they know that we've been here before. The scary thing is that we seem to be repeating this. As I said, this is supposedly the third cycle for us. The previous 2 civilizations of man, Homo, whatever it was, we destroyed ourselves with technology. They're trying desperately to avoid that. Did we, the last time, did we integrate our souls to the machine, to the matrix? I mean, that's my question I'm asking here. And let's get into the other spiritual aspect of this. So, how would a God allow this to go on? If you believe in a personification, male dominant mentality of a deity, particularly one that says that it's angry, it's vengeful, it's jealous, we are truly screwing with the original manufacturer's equipment. And when I saw this actually take place and seeing that they put it into a pig and realizing that we're learning, we're very much like emerging chimpanzees. That's what we are. Yeah, I know you don't like the idea, but we are. Genetically, we're actually their third cousins. So we're kind of just emerging and seeing what fire does for us. Wow. Wow, you get warm on it. Wow. Wow. If we eat meat, I don't know, maybe they found roasted peanuts. I don't know. But in any case, the point is, so you got gods. I mean, it's a huge debate. I get rammed all the time. Some person was telling me, kind of saying, you're a false prophet, and I'm going, really? If you're the emissary of your God with the personality that you are, like you're writing, I don't want anything to do with it. Neither does anyone else. But, getting back. So have we crossed the threshold? Is God about to get really pissed off? Is God already pissed off? Is there a God that you would say is male, let's say Christian? How about Muslim? How about Hindu? How about Buddha? I don't know. But if they exist, don't you think they're going to allow this to go on? That's my question. Seriously? Because if they do, then I have a dilemma for you. I told you this was going to be a good show, and I meant it. So let's just do a little bit of thinking here for you and I, all right? So if this is the case, then I make the following argument. Perfection is not a natural state of existence. It cannot exist, particularly in our 3D dimensional world. If perfection existed, nothing else would. You can't have both. There can be no God that is perfect because it would not be able to exist. Period. Imperfection would be, by all evidence, the natural state of all things. And if a God was perfect, it would go insane. I mean, we don't think these things out because we naturally assume the value. Do the math, baby. All right. Perfection cancels imperfection, and vice versa. They cannot exist in the same time-space continuum. It's impossible. Perfection would be the equivalency of energy vibrating at such a rate that could not be measured. And it would obliterate anything below it completely. Wouldn't stand a chance. You can't have both. It means that there's no perfection in any God. There is no God that can be omnipresent. No, it can't be omnipotent. No, impossible. Because if it sees everything, it's got nothing to exist on. Because if it's observing, if it's part of this, then it is by nature imperfect within itself. That's why no God can forgive sin. It's a control matrix. You know why? Because God never created it. Man did. As we're creating this nightmare that we're about to go in. Only man can forgive what we call sin. And apparently man can't seem to get that collectively into its collective consciousness. Our species cannot forgive. We get into a little something on here, a little bit on another point. So, how do you rationalize perfection unless this is perfection? We just have a different idea. Well, Ramjet, no, I'm just putting out the statement that if God does exist in a personified bipedal humanid form, it could never even come. It could not go down. What I'm saying, you're saying perfection would adapt the cloak of imperfection. Again, do the math. They are the antithesis of each other. It's the annihilation. You can't have matter and antimatter in the same space. it's, I love the theology that we can all go somewhere that's safe. Why? Because we're immersed in fear here. Fear is what motivates everything. It is the energy that is dominant. Yes, it was. Um, and this construct, I mean, I'm reading a couple of books, and I was in a deep meditation yesterday, and I went to a place I had never seen before. And it's, why we like to believe in the antithesis of everything that we see as reality? Because it gives us basic comfort to know that even in the most primal fears that we still hold, that there's some place that we can go back called home. Every living soul, when it comes to the end of its physical life, begins to fear in its consciousness that it will be alone, that it is about to experience something that there's going to be no one there to help them. That's the ultimate control matrix. And this is just my opinion. What I saw yesterday was frightening, because what I perceived was many of us may still be in that mindset. And folks, when you no longer have a time reference in the merging of two realms, even a second can be an epoch. And when you go with that basic fear of aloneness, that's why it's more comforting to believe in hell than to believe that there's not going to be anyone there. That's why conformity, uniformity, equality is something that we want to naturally gravitate towards. Why? Because it's all as a rebuttal to what we eventually know awaits each one of us. And that's why, again, even hell is a destination. Heaven, very little written about heaven, by the way. There's very little written about hell. Paradise, and maybe that is just it, that the trials that we must face here, that when we get to that ultimate point, I guess that's really where uniformity and conformity really comes in, isn't it? Hello, Miss Amber Dawn. How are you doing? Good to see you. Hello, I am. I like that deep thoughts, and that's exactly it. That's where we're getting to. You see, within us all, and I'm going to tell you the approach that, and when I saw this place, it was disturbing because there were so many spirits in there, so many, and they were lost, and it was disturbing. It's like I couldn't eat for most of the day because it was just disturbing that residual image stuck with me. And it became for me very clear that, well, the struggle here is that, well, what is the purpose that we're doing here? I think that many of us were here to actually witness what's taking place. And I believe that eventually the mass will begin to understand such acronyms as BOSTO, but there is a silent voice, and we're that silent voice. But I don't think we have to be silent anymore. I think we're learning truly that telepathy is. Not that it exists, it just is. We're all telepaths. It's just that we're like George and Hazel. We have a mental handicapper. That's what they did to us. They handicapped each one of us. And damn it, all of us are struggling to find out that which was taken from us, that which we naturally had, that which we should have naturally been cultivating in preparation for the departure. But we got handicapped. Many of us are so weighed down by our fears that it's very difficult, even when we see the opportunity to begin to fly, to sail above that. George, the metaphor was that he was carrying lead balls around. I think many of us do the same thing. We're so weighed down by that which hampers us. And it's the handicapper. Why is it that you doubt yourself so much? Why isn't, when they say intuitive, that means people have gotten the discipline to be intuitive, to listen to themselves. We all see the future. Why? We are the future. It's just going to be a matter of determination as to whose future you're living. You're still going to be you. And that's what today was about. Uniformity, conformity, equality for everyone, to be the same. Paradise or hell? I think after you read the short story, it's hell. And hell is not a place of fire and brimstone. Hell is your mind for most people. I love the chats, Bill. There's some really. I wish the people that on the replay make sure to look at the chat. So there we go. Just something that we can think about today. But we're all on the same. I mean, I look at this, David Barry, Trina, Big Al, Perry, and Julianne, and David Castle, and Robert V, and all the rest. I mean, there's just so many of us. We're on the same path. If we just realize, even crossing over, here's the thing about it. I'm going to bring a document out that shows how you can begin to prepare for your welcoming committee. Exactly. Thank you, David Barry. You're a leader in this group, brother. David's got a lot of knowledge, and that's what we need. All of you to begin to put your knowledge out there so the rest of us can come in and feast on it. I mean, I like serving a smorgasbord, but I like to walk into someone else's kitchen too. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and it's that way. Hey, Brian Lunsford, how you doing, my friend? Looking forward to seeing you. I hope you're feeling better. See you on Friday, I do believe. Yeah. So, all right, there is our deep thoughts for the day. I was going to put the Monday musings, and this was a musing. I mean, but I thought that this one would be a little bit more intense because I don't want to be in that box. I want to be joined soul to soul, spirit to spirit. That's the energy. When we pass over, folks, we don't have arms and feet. We don't have anything. As your body will be the residual thought that you will think, and it will form for you. But in your natural state, you're going to be what your natural state of consciousness is right now. You can't define it, neither can I. Why? Our consciousness is merely contained in these bodies, and that's what we associate with. But when we're outside of these bodies, as many of us do, well, in fact, all of us do. When you dream, you really are doing an out-of-body experiences. But anyway, you have no containment. All right, this has been fun. Tomorrow, Miss Trina, Thank you, Mr. Isby. Appreciate it. The body is a prison. Ain't that a truth? That's how they said many people that cross over. That's the first thing that they say. Like, oh man, is it glad to be the re of that thing, you know? You know that thing. Uh Truth in me, thank you. Spirit Girl, thank you as well. Bosto to everybody. And tomorrow will be a second look. Well, I think we're going to continue to talk about this because I do believe that I think many of us are probably like with Brian. I think the man's got a new mission, but there's so many of us that pull on that it's still part of it. And I think that if we cross, hey, Big Al, how you doing, my brother? Good to see you. So anyway, all right. Bosto, favor to you. See you tomorrow. I appreciate all of y'all. Y'all are a lot of fun to be with. I'll tell you what, there ain't no doubt about that. This is a group that knows how to party. That's all I got to say. I'm glad you invited me. All right. I'll see you tomorrow. All right. Bye.